And again, welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of a professional learning network that our leadership team has put together for our school's cadre. I think several of you, this is your first or maybe second year, and we're just really glad that you've decided to take advantage of this learning network to get some additional information and have some time with colleagues and with our leadership team to practice some of the really important skills of being a cadre member. I'm Patty Shetter, and I co-coordinate captain with Ann England, who is also here today. And my co-presenter for this professional learning network is Laura Blackburn. She is a regional implementation lead from Capital Captain and is going to be supporting us in doing some of this important learning today. So just a reminder that this is part 2 of a 3-part professional learning network. If you weren't at the first one, it's fine. We are recording these and are making them available to anyone to access at a later point in time. So on December 6th, we met for the first time and really delved into the methods and strategies for conducting high quality training that really result in increases in knowledge and skills. And just a reminder that, training is necessary, but not sufficient in terms of getting people to use new practices. But it's really important that when we are doing training that we're focusing on those strategies that increase people's knowledge in preparation for them being able to use the practices. So we reviewed a lot of those adult learning principles and practices and showed you some of the resources that Captain has developed to help you guys with that particular requirement of conducting high quality training. Today and in April 4th, at our final meeting, the emphasis and focus is really going to be on the methods for conducting high quality and effective coaching, including e-coaching, which we've all become very familiar with over these last couple of years, but wanted to really just delve more into the practices and processes of high quality coaching. Today, we're going to really emphasize and hone in on the kind of core aspects of the communication when coaching and the different communication strategies that are important to use when you're providing coaching. We're going to talk about differences between consultation and coaching, because we know that a lot of our cadre are really familiar with and doing a lot of consultation in your roles, but coaching is a little bit different creature and a little bit different process. So we're going to hone in on some of those differences. And then we're going to do some practice of those communication techniques that are called the ORs. That's our little acronym for the day that you guys will be learning more about as we go. But before we delve into the content, as is a best practice when doing high quality training, we want to get sort of a baseline of where you all are with the 3 core components of our training today. So I'm going to hand it over to Laura to do our first poll.
Awesome. All right, so we'll do a poll to start out with. And let's see, I'm going to launch the first one. And it is, I'm going to pull these down. I'm in December, so I got to go to February. The first poll is, what percentage of a new skill that was learned in training will actually be implemented in the classroom without the support of coaching? So 25%, 5%, 15%, 30%. So go ahead and answer that best of your knowledge. And this is a pre-assessment, so just do your best guessing. All right, about 10 more seconds if you want to answer, get in there. All right, I'm going to end the poll. And it looks like majority of folks said 5%. So 5% of a new skill that was learned in training will be implemented in the classroom without the support of coaching. Awesome job. All right, so let's do poll number 2. I'm going to launch that one. Are coaching and consultation the same practices? Yes or no? Patty gave away the answer to this one if you were listening. Wow, there's some fast responses happening.
Little priming, see that?
Mm. All right, 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Let's see, 100% of you said no, coaching and consultation are not the same practice. That is correct. All right, so let's do our last pre-assessment here. In the OARS acronym, the O stands for opinion-based questions, open-ended questions, open-planned questions, or open interrogative questions. Go ahead and answer the poll of what you think the O in the OARS stands for. All right, 10 more seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Let's see how everyone did. The majority of you think that the O stands for open in open-ended questions, and the majority of you would be correct. This is awesome. So everybody knows everything. We'll see you guys next time. Just kidding. All right.
All right, so we are really going to be emphasizing from the implementation drivers, the implementation driver of coaching. We talked a lot about training last time, but coaching is the next component of that sort of left arm of the implementation driver pyramid that we're going to be really honing in on. And if you think about these implementation drivers on the left-hand side, selection is the selection of the practices. And then there's the training in the practices to build people's knowledge. And then there's the coaching in the practices to get people to use them, all with the goal of reaching fidelity, which is at the top of that triangle. That's the ultimate outcome that we're looking for, because fidelity, when we're implementing the evidence-based practice, is what's going to give us the best results if we're using the practice the way the practice is intended. So what do we mean when we say coaching or practitioner coaching? This is intended to support the use of the skills needed to implement the new practice. It is something, an activity or a set of activities that should follow a training so that that information or knowledge that people gained during training can be transferred into the skills of using them in practice with real life kids in real life classrooms. And even though you may be doing, if you're doing high quality training, you may be doing an element of practicing during your training. When you get into the dynamic of an actual classroom with real students who are incredibly unpredictable, that's where the coaching really has the most powerful effect. So coaching takes place in authentic environments where the skill is actually going to be used. Coaching can require multiple cycles, and we're going to talk a lot more about this process of coaching and the coaching cycles the next time that we meet. But generally speaking, coaching may require 4 or sometimes more cycles of observing, providing feedback by a skilled coach, and then conducting that pre-observation session for the next time to set new coaching goals. So it's really a circular and cyclic process that usually, depending on the learner and depending on the evidence-based practice, will take 4 or more cycles to be able to get someone to that level of fidelity and confidence with implementing a new practice. Coaching can be done in person, and I think that's probably the way that before the pandemic we were all most used to doing it and felt like was the most feasible and effective, or it can be done via video conferencing. And I think we have a newfound respect and understanding of how that can be done, and research actually supports both in-person coaching and using e-coaching or video conferencing as a method for being able to do the observations and the reflective feedback and the pre-observation conferences that are all components of good coaching. This is a really important thing to know. Without coaching, only 5% of what is learned in training is actually put to use in the classroom. And that was one of the poll questions for a reason. This is a really important rationale for why we do coaching. You can train until the cows come home, and all you're going to do is build people's knowledge. Only about 5% of what anyone learns in a training actually gets translated into use in a classroom. So not that trainings aren't great. Trainings are wonderful as a starting point, as a way of building people's interest in learning something, as a way of being able to increase people's understanding of something before they actually go to implement it. But it is necessary, but not sufficient when it comes to actually changing practices in classrooms. And then with practitioner coaching, the outcome of coaching should be the use of the new practice with fidelity. And incidentally, one of the amazing byproducts that we know about coaching is it also increases the person being coached, the coachee. It increases their confidence and feelings of competency. And some recent research even says that it keeps people in their professions longer. So when we talk about teacher attrition and the problems that we have with teachers leaving the field, if we're doing really good coaching, we could actually be enhancing or increasing that retention of our teacher workforce. Laura.
All right. So what's the difference between consultation and coaching? There is a difference. That was also one of the poll questions, and it's important too, because I think it's important to note that a lot of us are used to being in the consultation role when we're in schools. I know as a former school psychologist in behaviors, that was our thing, is we would go in and we would consult with our teachers. And the difference there is it's kind of the expert model versus a partnership model. So consultation, it may occur several times, but like Patty was saying, coaching is always cyclic, like it has a cycle to it. It might require 4 or more of those cycles, but it has the pre-observation, the observation, the post-observation, pre-observation, observation, post-observation. It's a pretty standard cycle, whereas consultation, you may just come in, pop in, give your expert advice and pop out. Consultation, we usually do it in one-to-one or really small groups settings where we go in and we have our conversations about what our area of expertise is, and then we leave. Whereas coaching, we can do it one-to-one, we can do it in person, or we can do it via video conferencing, like Patty was saying. E-coaching is one of the positive things I feel like to come out of this pandemic. There are not a lot, and that is one of them, that we're all now much more comfortable with this. So our consultation model is, like I said, it's really that consultant and expert who's being sought out to give the guidance to somebody else on a specific area or need, right? So if I'm the behaviorist and I have a student who's having a troubling behavior, I come in with my expertise to consult with the teacher to help out on that specific area. Whereas the coaching outcome is the use of a new practice with fidelity. So it's skill demonstration rather than information giving. It's getting your coaching practitioner to fidelity with their new skill. The consultant generally provides professional input and next steps, whereas when we're doing a coaching model, the coach supports the individual to come up with the next steps. So rather than telling somebody what to do, we're helping them be able to figure out what to do on their own. I think 800 years ago when we first started this coaching model, the best way for me to think about it was, it's like we're a mirror. If you're coaching, you're a mirror to somebody. You're holding the mirror up for somebody to be able to reflect on their own behavior. Whereas a consultant, I would be pointing out things and acting more as an expert. Consultation doesn't necessarily involve any direct observation, right? You have your area of expertise, you come in and you consult on it. Whereas coaching always includes observation. And then we have that feedback after the observation. Again, the pre-observation, the observation, the post-observation, where we give that reflective feedback and allow your coaching partner or practitioner to be able to look in that mirror and discover what it is that they need to be doing next. So there is a real distinction between consultation and coaching. And I will say I'm working with a group of psychologists and behaviorists right now. I'm going to pick on you guys because I'm one of you. And it's really hard to switch your mindset from this professional kind of consultative model to a coaching model. But once you do it, you can see the significant differences between the two. So what we're going to do now is we are going to head you into breakout rooms. And I want you to discuss the differences between consultation and coaching together. Pick out some significant differences that you see between the two, maybe in your practice, or just as you see hearing about them, and then be prepared to share back something. So we're going to spend about 8 minutes in these rooms. So Gavin's going to go ahead and open the rooms for you. And when you see the invite, click on it and then discuss the differences between consultation and coaching.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, I think everyone's back.
Welcome back, everyone. So I hope you guys got some time to have a little conversation about consultation and coaching. And I was wondering which one do you think, if you want to put it in chat or if you want to come off mute, go ahead, but which one do you think is more effective? Do you think consultation model or the coaching model is more effective? Coaching, 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 coaching. I've seen lots of coaching. Coaching, coaching. Yeah, I definitely think that coaching. And let's see, Malika, you raised your hand. Do you want to come off mute?
Yeah, because I think it's important to state, like, clearly coaching is better in theory, but I also think it's important to understand the environments that we are allowed to actually be of contribution to. And sometimes consulting is what is needed because that's with the time that's allotted. So I love the idea of coaching. And I think a point that our groups talked about is like, how do you actually have coaching set up with Fidelity? When you look at the time, when you look at your access, when you look at how you're being called into certain environments to actually support, like, how do we also, you know, incorporate that so that coaching can actually exist as it's designed to exist and doesn't turn into the consultation or some other variation of that.
Absolutely. Great points, Malika. Thank you. And I also think that was a really good point too, but there are times and situations where consultation is required, right? And I think that we shouldn't forget those times. Absolutely. But I think coaching, when used effectively after a training for the purpose of coaching for fidelity of implementation, will be more effective than consultation for that purpose. Which one of the two do you think is more difficult to do? Do you think it's consultation or do you think it's coaching? Go ahead, put in chat or come off. Seeing lots of coaching due to the time. Coaching, because you don't have duty to buy in, more time consuming, higher level of skill, absolutely. And then you have to build a relationship that needs to be established. That's a really good point too. Yep, coaching from a time. So it sounds like everybody's in agreement. Coaching is probably a little more difficult to do than consultation. I think we were talking when you guys were in the breakout room a little bit that I have a really hard time with the coaching because I love to tell people what to do. So it's hard for me to switch from your consultation mode of telling somebody to a coaching mode of where I'm trying to pull them into making it their ideas instead. So it is, I think it is difficult, especially for those of us who our primary role is a consultative role. All right.
All right, so thinking about and you know, sort of put yourself in the role of a person being coached. Or I think it's even easier if we think about, because I think a lot of us have kids or nephews or nieces or, you know, have been involved in some way in some sort of organized sport situation. And I think that most of us have probably experienced a good coach in that context and a not so good coach in that context. And so I want you guys to think about, and you can either put them in the chat or come off of mute and share verbally. What are some of the negative qualities or behaviors of that person when you think of, oh, that was the worst coach ever? What were some of the negative qualities or behaviors of a bad coach? So I'm seeing lots of input so far. My way or the highway, always focusing on what you're doing wrong, poor communication skills, being too aggressive or too critical, only pointing out what you should not be doing and not really focusing on what you should be doing, lacking flexibility, not listening, being condescending, providing vague feedback and not necessarily being as specific as is needed. And then, oh, that's a good one. Inability to model the skill. Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. I remember when we signed my oldest son up for football at his request, not mine. I was not a big fan of the idea, but he really wanted to play football. It was one of those teams where you pay an inordinate amount of money and then you're not guaranteed playtime. And so he sat the bench literally the entire season, even though in practice, he was out there, he was working hard. He was actually doing really well. He was very effective in his position, but he wasn't getting playtime. And just watching what that did to his poor little soul, not to mention his dad. Boy, I heard some words out of that man that I never even knew existed. But the coaching, it wasn't reinforcing effort. It wasn't, giving the kids an opportunity to show what they were learning and what they were practicing in an actual game. And the coaches were, that was probably my worst coaching experience. Fixed mindsets in the coach. Yeah. So then now switch your gears a little bit and think about a situation where, the person who was coaching was amazing, like the most amazing coach that your kids have ever had or that you've ever had an opportunity to interact with. What were some of the positive qualities or behaviors of that good coach? Active listening, building on strengths, inspiring and encouraging, made me feel like I came in with some usable knowledge or skill set, provides a lot of self-reflection and opportunities to discover rather than being told what to do, allowed me to follow my passions. They were interested, gave concrete feedback, patient. Yeah, these are all really important things to think about. So we're having you guys do this and reflect on your experiences with good coaches and bad coaches, because all of the things that you guys are saying are qualities and behaviors of that good coach are all of those effective and evidence-based practices that really make up that coaching repertoire. And really will make you the most effective in this role as you can be. So there are definitely some underlying assumptions needed to be an effective coach and for an effective coaching relationship to be established. And the first one is that you have to really assume that the practitioners you're working with have good skills, but that their skills can be improved. No one is at their end point in terms of learning new things. And that's you as the coach learning how to be a better coach and the people that you're providing coaching to. So you really have to have that flexible and that improvement and that change mindset. The second underlying assumption needed is that practitioners establish new skills or refine existing skills primarily through self-evaluation. Meaning that if we go in and tell them what they're not doing or what they should be doing, then it's us who are in control of it. When we help them to be able to reflect on their own practices, then they're the ones who are feeling empowered, and they're the ones who are going to establish buy-in, and they're the ones who are going to basically own that new skill and that new thought process and carry it forward. The third underlying assumption is that practitioners can change when we use data and observational feedback. And those are two of your biggest tools as a coach. Other than your own skill and your communication is really using the data as the tool for reflection. Laura used the analogy of holding up the mirror. The mirror is the data, and showing them what the data is indicating about their use of the practice, steps on the fidelity checklist, what is resulting in terms of student learning or student behavior change. Those are really going to be your tools. And then the fourth underlying assumption or thing that needs to be recognized or realized is that this is a cyclical process. Coaching isn't a one-time, one and done, activity. There's procedure and process that goes on during coaching, and it evolves. It evolves as your relationship is established, as the skill is being demonstrated that you're working with the practitioner to learn to use. At first you might just be working with them on how to set up for the use of the practice. And then your next coaching cycle, it might be using it with a student in a particular context. And then it might be reflecting on the data on the next coaching cycle, or collecting data about the implementation or effect of the practice on the next cycle. But it's an ongoing cyclical process, not just a one and done situation.
All right, so let's talk about some of the communication strategies we can use while we are engaging in this coaching process. So also was a pre-assessment question of what the O stands for in OARS. And so OARS is the acronym we use because we work in special education, I do, so I love acronyms for everything. So we're going to use this one called OARS, and it stands for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflective listening, and summarizing. If you can remember in your head OARS when you're practicing your coaching, it'll help you to use those good communication strategies. So the first one we're going to talk about is open-ended questions. So open-ended questions are questions that invite someone to say more about a topic, right? So an open-ended question would be something you would give to elicit more information from your coaching practitioner. I have a 13-year-old child of my own at home, and I have had to become the master of open-ended questions. I don't know how many of you pick up your kids from school and they get in the car and you say, how was school today? Good, right? That's just eliciting a one response from them. So I have to get better at it and say, what did you do at school today? Except for now, my 13-year-old has started answering good to that question as well. So you become the master of open-ended questions when you have teenagers. So think of it that way. So let's talk about some open versus closed questions. So open question starters are, tell me more about this. How would you describe? Can you describe this? I got another non-chatty 13-year-old girl too. Thank you, Misery Loves Company. Can you tell me what? Can you tell me why? These are kind of open question starters. The closed ones are you, do you, have you, should you, will you, would you, can you? I think of it as if you can answer a question with a yes or no or a one-word response, that's a pretty closed question. Open questions are ones that really force people to tell you more about the situation. Why do we want to use open closed questions versus closed questions in our coaching relationship? It's because we're trying to elicit information from our coaching partner because we want them to come up with the next steps. We want them to be reflective of the information. So the more you talk about something, the more likely you are to get to a solution. So we really want to focus on those open-ended questions. So some examples of those are, tell me about your goals for this student. How do you want to record the data? Describe for me the steps that you use. What can I do to support you with this? Why do you think that's an important step? These are all questions that are eliciting more than just a yes or no or a one word, right? So again, we want to use these open-ended questions with our coaching practitioners because we want them to come to some realizations themselves. So the more information they can get out, the better. So some examples of closed questions. Are you going to do the next step? How would you answer that? Yes, right? That's it. That's a closed question. Do you have the materials prepped? No. Okay, closed question. Have you watched the Ames module for that EBP? Nope. Should you talk to him about that? Yes. Will you get the icons ready before I come? No, I'm gonna let you do it when you get here, right? So those are all closed questions. So for example, on the Ames module, if we have you watched the Ames module for that EBP? That's a closed question. They're gonna answer yes or no. By switching just a few of those words, we can make it an open question, right? Tell me a little bit about what you saw in the Ames module for that evidence-based practice. That's eliciting a lot more information out of the person, right? Do you have the materials prepped? Yes or no? We could change that to open-ended by saying, what materials, what steps do you need to take to get to the materials to get them prepped, right? So you can just switch them around a little bit in your head. I will say it takes practice though, using open-ended questions. And it's hard when you're used to closed-end questions. So it takes some practice to think about. So let's do a couple of them. So in the chat, let's see, we go ahead and put in number 1. So it says, are you going to do the next step? That's a closed question, right? Yes, I'm going to. No, I'm not going to. So how could we change that to make it an open question? Yeah. What's the next step? Tell me about the next step. What is your next step? Tell me. Yep. These are all great. How might you go about doing the next step? Yep. Tell me, what is your next step? Tell me a little more about your next steps. Tell me about the next step in this process. These are all great. So then what are you going to do and what do you need to do to accomplish that? That's great. So then let's look at number 2. Do you have the materials prepped? Yes or no, right? Nope, I don't have them prepped. Yes, I do have them prepped. So let's see, you guys are already on it. Go ahead and change that to an open question. How's the material prep going? That's so good. What materials will you need? Which materials are prepped? These are good. Tell me about any materials you need to get prepped. How's it going? How are you prepping the materials? Tell me more about your materials. How will you prepare? These are great. So you guys are getting this. Let's take a look at the materials you've prepped. Awesome. See how those elicit more of a response than just the closed question? So then let's look at number 3. Have you watched the Ames module for that EBP? How could we go about switching that to an open-ended? What was your main takeaway from the Ames module? What were some of your takeaways from the Ames module? Yep, and we kind of went over that one a little bit too. Oh, I like that, just thoughts. What are your thoughts on the Ames module? That's great. What is something you'll implement from the Ames module? Ooh, that's good. Tell me your favorite part of the module. These are all great. What were your takeaways? Absolutely. So what about number 4 where it says, should you talk to him about that? Nope, I should not. I should not talk to him about that. How can we change that to make it an open question? How do you plan to approach him about that? Why are you planning to? What will you talk to him about? What are your thoughts about talking to him on that? Who would be the best person to talk to him and why? That's great. So you guys are getting this. What do you want to address with him? That's great. All right, so let's go to the next ones. Will you get the icons ready before I come? No, I'm not. I'm going to let you do that when you get here. So let's make that an open question. Which icons were you able to prepare? How will you design the icons before I see you next? How can I support you with icon preparation? That's great. Which icons will you need to prepare? What icons can you prepare before our next meeting? I like, what's your timeline? That was a good one. What icons will you prepare? What are your next steps to get the icons ready? I think we're getting this. So last one is, can you send me your baseline? Why, yes, I can. Closed question. How can you make that more open of a question? Oh, what is the baseline data showing so far? Tell me about your baseline data. What have you noticed about your baseline data? What stands out in the baseline data? These are all good. Ways to make them open. Share with me what stands out in the data. When is a reasonable timeline for you sharing the baseline data? That's good. So you're eliciting, and again, the idea of an open question is to elicit more information from somebody. All right, so now we're going to do a little breakout activity. We're going to practice our O of the ORs, open-ended questions. So you guys were in groups of 3 little triads last time, so you're going to be back in little groups of 3. And what I want you to do is one person's going to be an observer. So you get to sit and watch. One person's going to be a coach, and one person's going to be the participant. But don't think you're going to pick one. You're going to get to be each of those. We're allowing enough time for you guys to spend 5 minutes as each of those. So the participant is your coaching participant. That's your coaching partner. There you're going to tell an opening statement about something interesting that's occurred to you once in your life. And I'm leaving it this broad because it could be, I got the front row parking spot at the grocery store this weekend. Or it could be, I went hang gliding when I was 20. So it can be anything you want it to be, just any statement that you're going to have. And then the coach is going to try and elicit more information about that story from the participant using only open-ended communication and questions. Okay. So then the observer is going to track how many questions were open and how many were closed. And you're going to have a 30-second feedback at the end, just to see how that was. And then you're going to rotate roles. Does that make sense? So everybody gets to be every position one time. And so do about 3 to 4 minutes per person with about a minute of feedback of how many questions were open and how many were closed.
Laura, can we have the observer be the timekeeper too, just so everybody gets a chance?
Great idea. Yes. Observer, you have to count open, closed, and time. You have a very important role here. All right, if there aren't any questions, we will see you in about 15 minutes.
15 minutes, yeah. So we had you
Recorded.
We broke out the open-ended questions from the rest of the ORs because it's probably the hardest to master if you're in a habit of doing more of the closed questions. But we want to move on to the other 3 communication strategies that are part of really good high-quality coaching, and that includes affirmations, reflective listening, and summarizing. So affirmations, I think probably this is a strength of most of you. These are just statements or gestures that really recognize the strengths and acknowledge behaviors that led to some sort of positive change. And they can be big or small, but they really are designed and intended to build the confidence of the person. And also, they're a huge component of establishing that rapport with people. And so we have some examples here of affirming responses. It can be things like, I appreciated that you are willing to meet with me today. Even if they didn't do anything, you can still not acknowledge their willingness to meet and be present and be a part of whatever it is that you're doing. You clearly are a very resourceful person. That's a great one to use if there's someone who, traditionally kind of struggles with accessing resources or getting resources provided for them in their context. You handled yourself really well in that situation. That's a great suggestion. And sometimes it can be, well, if I were in your shoes, or if I were in that situation, it's sort of self-deprecating a little bit to make them feel like, what they're doing is really good or great. And then even something as simple as I've really enjoyed talking with you today, or I really enjoy working with you, or I enjoy seeing your progress. Those are all great examples of affirmations. Reflective listening actually is a little more complicated than it sounds right off of the gate. There's 3 different ways that you can use reflective listening. And the 3 that are listed here include repeating or rephrasing. And this is simply where you just restate, sometimes substituting a word or two to acknowledge or to check your understanding. So what I'm hearing you saying is, Paraphrasing, it's where you're basically restating what they said and checking to make sure that it is in fact what they meant. And then reflection of feelings. This is where you emphasize the emotional aspects of communication through feeling statements. And this is really the deepest form of reflective listening and probably requires the highest level of relationship with the person that you're providing this kind of reflective listening with. And then summarizing is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically being concise and summarizing what you've covered or what decisions have been made. You always want to end your summarization with an invitation to get more input, like, is that accurate? Did I say that right? Did I miss anything? Anything you want to add or correct? And then depending on the response that you get from your summary statement, it may lead to planning for something that is needed, a concrete step towards the next activity. So we have a video that we want to show you of the ORs actually being implemented in an e-coaching session. And I'm going to set this up a little bit, but what we really want you to focus on as you're watching this coaching session are the communication strategies. We want you to be looking for open-ended questions, for affirmations, for reflections, and for summarizing. And if it helps, try to write down an example of each one. But what you're going to see is our colleague Amber. She's part of our statewide implementation team for Captain. She's conducting e-coaching with a teacher on the evidence-based practice of pivotal response training. And so you're going to see her using the fidelity checklist for classroom pivotal response training and doing a coaching cycle with the teacher that she is working with. This is their first coaching session. So they've met through training, but they haven't actually done a coaching cycle yet. So this is the very first coaching cycle. And the goal of this first coaching cycle is really for the coachee to understand how to use the fidelity checklist as part of the coaching process. But you're going to see her set it up, go through the coaching process using examples of the ORs, and then ending with her setting up for the next coaching cycle. So she ends by setting up the goal for their next coaching cycle. So in essence, it's the coaching cycle. The observation is the only thing you won't see here, but you will see them setting goals for the next coaching cycle and reflecting on the observation that was made via video. So let me go ahead and start this and be looking for, again, examples of the ORs.
So just to kind of give you a brief overview of how the coaching session goes. So we'll utilize the feedback form that we went over in more detail during group consult 2 to kind of reflect on how you feel like the lesson went. I'm going to ask you to identify your checks, minus, checker, plus for each of the components, and then we can talk through anything you have some ideas for or questions as we move through the form. Okay. And then after we do that, you'll be able to identify what you would like to focus on for next time, and we can brainstorm any ideas if that would be helpful. Okay. So do you have anything else for our call today that you would want to talk about that you don't think will be included in this?
I just want to make sure I talk about like fidelity, because I do want to get the certification. So
okay,
like that's my goal.
Okay.
So just to get me closer to that and doing it with fidelity.
Okay, great. So I'll make sure that when we talk through that, I'll give you some specific information from just my thoughts and looking at each one to help with the focal point. Will that help?
Okay. Yeah, that'd be
okay, great. Okay. Is this big enough for you?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay. I always can make it a little bit. Okay, yeah, so the first one, ensuring the student was paying attention before providing the cue. And because you did it in a group, so I want you to think about both of your kiddos when you answer these.
Either a minus or a check, because Arya was paying attention, but Camden was like he would kind of look for a second and then he wanted to look back around the room.
Okay.
At the beginning. And then I guess a check. I felt like sometimes I had it, and sometimes I didn't.
Okay, so there was a balance. You felt like in between. Sometimes it was better than others.
Maybe.
What about providing clear and developmentally cues? Did you feel like your cues for them were developmentally appropriate?
So would that be like the your turn and you do and
Yeah, like, and put on, sit down, like any
Uh-huh.
cues that you use to help guide their behavior.
I think a check. I could use some visuals in there.
Oh, okay,
You
okay.
know, like they were trying to stand up and Tina was just prompting them to sit down. And if I hadn't been so frazzled, maybe I could have had a visual prompt at least
Oh, okay.
first before the physical one.
Okay, so maybe that extra visual support you feel like would help clarify what you wanted them to do.
Yeah, and I planned on using visuals, but I was a little discombobulated. So
Sure.
today it was a mess.
I am super impressed that you went ahead with a different student and were really flexible. So I appreciate that you did that. And I know you did that on the
Well, I
fly.
really wanted to get the feedback before I start working on my next lesson. So.
Okay, great. Did you feel like you varied your instructions for your cues throughout the lesson?
Probably give a minus because like having the hand motions for the song is a little tricky because it's like, you know, you can't stop singing the song. Like you're the model
Right.
and they're supposed to be copying.
Right.
And like other having the aid kind of give a prompt, a physical prompt. I don't know. I mean, I did tell the aid not to prompt it the next time around.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess a minus because I don't know if I did it or not.
What about, so it sounds like for the imitating the songs, it was a little hard. What about for your stringing the beats? Do you feel like you had varied instructions?
At least the check. I definitely said like put on and you do and let's put shoes on him and
Yeah, I noticed that as well, that you had several you used for that. So you use this sometimes. So do you feel like your overall score is more of a check?
okay, I guess a check.
Okay, so then based on everything we talked about, we reviewed the antecedent components. And like I said, I feel like you did a ton of like self-reflection and brainstorming of possible things you'd like to do differently. And then we talked about more of the consequence components and how those were delivered, and then just basic session management. So which component of these kind of 12, the antecedent consequences, do you want to focus on for your next coaching session?
Well, now that I more clearly understand like 10 through 12, I
Yeah.
think maybe I want to focus on that.
Okay, so you want to focus more around consequence components.
Yeah, just because before I really wasn't understanding it. And I was
Okay.
kind of just going off of my best guess of understanding.
Sure,
And
great.
now I think I really have it clear in my head.
Okay, so what specifically, so there's a couple there, I just want to make sure, do you want to keep them together or do you want to like focus more on direct or contingency?
I think I'd like to keep them together if that's possible because before
Yeah.
the problem was that they weren't separated really in my mind.
Okay. So then I'm gonna put consequence components, you want to focus on all 3 items together during lesson implementation, is that accurate?
Yes, please.
Okay. And then I email you this, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that, I email you our notes and
Okay.
this form afterwards, so you will have it. Okay, so then you identified to focus on the consequence component. So I'm curious, what's something you feel like a change you can try this week to help support you in focusing on that and implementing that?
I think I'm just gonna try making sure that my reinforcements are like moving the students in the right direction behaviorally and with learning skills and stuff.
Okay, great. And I just that awareness, like you talked about, I feel like will make a kind of probably now you have it in your mind and thinking through like, what am I reinforcing for? Is it making a difference? Am I seeing a change in skill?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
All right. She went through and had her rate her confidence, which is a really awesome technique for motivational interviewing that we'll get into a little bit more probably next time. But hopefully that gave you guys an opportunity to see some of the ORs in action. There were lots of examples of open-ended and affirmations. At the very end, you saw her summarize, and she did that several times, summarizing what they went over during the session, summarizing what her next steps are, and then several examples of reflective. So we're actually going to send you guys into a breakout room for one final opportunity to practice. Same as you did last time in triads, one observer, one coach, and one participant. Laura, do you want to tell them what they're going to be doing in this breakout room?
Yeah, sure. So in this breakout room, it's the same thing, observer, coach, participant, and the participant is going to tell about a conflict they had with another person recently, and as well as how the conflict was resolved. Again, this is broad. This can be a conflict at work, a conflict at home, a conflict with your 13-year-old child, anything like that. The coach is going to practice using affirmations and that reflective listening. So the open-ended questions, reflective listening, and affirmations. And then the coach is going to provide a summary to describe back the resolution to the participant. And the observer is going to tally the total number of ORs that you see being used. So again, the coach is going to tell a story about a conflict and how it was resolved. The coach is going to use the ORs and specifically affirmations and reflective listening. And the observer is going to tell you the number used and be the timekeeper. I think we have about 12 minutes for this one. So 3 minutes each person, and then a minute of the summary. All right, I think we're ready to head to the breakout rooms.
Everyone.
This meeting is being recorded.
So I hope that gave you guys a little bit of an opportunity to kind of think about and practice the ORs. I think Nicola put in the chat, she said it was fun, but it was a lot harder than it seemed like it would be. And yeah, I mean, like anything, it takes practice. But hopefully, this got you guys started and thinking about the communication aspects of coaching. We do have a really awesome resource that we recorded a couple of years ago. We had an opportunity to get a training at the summit on motivational interviewing. And Sarah Owens from the University of Missouri was our presenter, and we recorded it, and it's available through our YouTube channel. You can get there through the website. But if you're interested in learning more about motivational interviewing and effective communication techniques for coaching, well worth the time to be able to take a peek at that. All right, Laura.
All right, time for polls again, you guys. This means it's the end of the session. So we're gonna do a little end poll here. So the first poll is, what percentage of new skills that we learn in training will actually be implemented in the classroom without the support of coaching? 25%, 5%, 15%, or 30%? All right, 5 seconds left. All right, ending the poll. And let's see, it looks like 89% of you picked 5%, and that is correct. Without coaching, 5% of what we learn will actually be implemented. All right, so let's go to poll 2. Are coaching and consultation the same practices? Yes or no? Wow, it's so fast. Everyone's answering so fast. All right, 5 more seconds. 4. I'm going to end the poll. And 100% of you got that correct, that coaching and consultation are not the same practice. Correct. All right, let's do poll number 3. In the ORS acronym, the O stands for opinion-based questions, open-ended questions, open planned questions, or open interrogative questions. All right, 5 more seconds. And in the poll. And 98% of you got that correct. The O in ORS is for open-ended questions. All right. Thank you everyone for participating in the polls. That helps us with our data collection.
So the ORS techniques, just to kind of wrap things up and to set you all up for next time. Good communication's good communication. And of course, those are really important for coaching. We hope that you guys also have been thinking about how you might be able to use those communication strategies throughout your work, whether it's in IEP meetings or in team meetings, or even if you're doing consultation. The communication techniques can be really effective in a lot of different contexts. When we meet again on April 4th for our third and final professional learning network for the year, we're going to go more into the actual coaching cycles and coaching process, show you how to use the fidelity checklist as part of your observation and feedback, and help you guys to more accurately identify the components of high quality coaching. We're going to teach you how to use a fidelity checklist on yourself when you're conducting your coaching cycles. And we're going to talk about overcoming some of the common barriers to coaching, including one that was brought up today, which is finding the time to actually do the coaching cycle. So hope you all can join us on April 4th. Stay healthy and go Rams. Bye, guys.